Have you ever had the strange feeling that someone close to you, maybe a friend, a coworker, even a family member, doesn't quite like you, even though they smile and speak kindly? It's a confusing sensation, isn't it? On the surface, everything looks fine. They say the right things, they laugh at your jokes, they check in on you, sometimes even compliment you. But something about the way they look at you or the way you feel after being around them doesn't sit right. You're not imagining things. You see, not all hostility is loud, not all resentment wears a scowl. Sometimes the deepest dislike is dressed in politeness. Sometimes hatred hides behind a smile. And what makes it even more difficult is that the person expressing it may not even realize they're doing it. That's where Carl Jung's work becomes so important, especially his concept of the shadow. Jung believed that each of us has a shadow self, the part of our psyche we don't want to look at. The envy, the rage, the shame, the fear. These feelings get pushed down, buried beneath layers of who we think we're supposed to be, but just because they're hidden doesn't mean they're gone. In fact, the more we ignore them, the more they start to creep out, often without us knowing. And here's the twist. The people around you, especially those who haven't done their inner work, are often projecting their own repressed emotions onto you. Their hidden anger gets quietly released through sarcasm. Their jealousy shows up as friendly competition. Their need for control is disguised as care, and you become the canvas for their unresolved pain. It's subtle, it's confusing, and if you don't recognize it, you may start to question yourself instead of protecting yourself. But there are signs, small signals that whisper the truth, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. Let's start with one of the most common and most deceptive, sarcasm. Now, a little sarcasm between friends isn't always a red flag, but when it carries a sting, when the joke is always at your expense, pay attention. Maybe they tease you about your success. Maybe they laugh and say, well, not everyone can be perfect like you, with a tone that lingers a little too long. It's not what they say, it's how they say it. The chuckle may sound light, but underneath it is a seed of contempt. There's shadows leaking through, resentment dressed up as humor, and somehow you're left smiling along, even though you feel a bit smaller every time. Another sign to watch for is subtle sabotage. They might forget to pass along important information. They may encourage you to take a risk, only to smirk when it backfires. You might notice that things seem to go off track whenever they're involved. Plans unravel, opportunities slip through, and yet nothing they did was technically wrong. It's the kind of behavior that leaves you confused, doubting yourself, wondering if you're imagining things. But Jung would say, no, you're just picking up on the effects of unspoken resentment. Then there's the quiet competitor. This one's tricky because on the surface, they seem supportive. They cheer you on. They compliment your work. But there's always a but. You get a promotion and they casually mention how easy your role must be. You share a personal win and they immediately follow it with one of their own. You sense the undercurrent. It's not celebration, it's rivalry. And here's the key. Rivalry where there should be none. These aren't competitions. These are your joys, your growth, but their shadow can't handle seeing you shine because your light reminds them of where they feel dim. Fake kindness is another form this can take. Overly sweet words that feel oddly out of place. Compliments that sound like praise but land like a performance. Maybe they're generous with their help, but somehow you end up feeling indebted, not supported. Maybe they flatter you, but their eyes are cold, their tone is tight. Their smile fades the moment you look away. And deep down you sense it. The kindness is a costume. It's the shadow's way of staying socially acceptable while still expressing discomfort. They don't know how to confront their envy, their anger, their unresolved issues, so they cover it all with sugar. What's most important to understand is this. These behaviors rarely come from true malice. Most of the time, they come from pain, from parts of themselves they've buried so deep they don't even realize they're acting out. Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But the opposite is also true. What others project on you tells you more about them than it does about you. Still, that doesn't mean you should ignore it. You can hold compassion for someone and still create distance. You can forgive their wounds without accepting their behavior. You're not responsible for the emotions they can't face, but you are responsible for protecting your peace. If you've ever left a conversation feeling drained, deflated, or inexplicably small, if you've ever questioned your worth after someone jokingly put you down, if you've ever felt unseen in a room full of polite smiles, then your intuition is doing its job. You're sensing what they're trying not to say. You don't need to confront them, you don't need to fix them, but you do need to trust what you're feeling because sometimes love sounds like warmth and sometimes hate sounds like just kidding. You might also notice a different kind of hostility, one that wears the face of concern. It's the kind that says, I'm only trying to help while slowly tightening its grip on your decisions. This is control disguised as care. They might discourage you from pursuing something new by questioning if it's really the right time. They might express worry when you succeed, cloaking their discomfort in protective advice. I just don't want to see you get hurt. But their words don't empower you, they shrink you. You leave those conversations feeling smaller, unsure, maybe even guilty for wanting more. This form of disguised hostility often comes from someone who is quietly terrified of your growth because your progress threatens the version of themselves they've grown comfortable with. You stepping into your power reminds them of the ways they've stayed stuck. And so to feel safe again, they try to keep you close, not with ropes, but with whispers of doubt dressed as affection. Then there's the old standby, gossip and criticism. Not all of it is malicious, but when someone talks about others behind their backs with excessive judgment or mockery, you can be certain of one thing. They do it with you too. You're just not in the room to hear it. Sometimes it starts small, a comment about someone's outfit, a snide remark about someone's choices. But over time, the pattern emerges. Their words tear down more than they build up. There's a hunger in their tone, a satisfaction in seeing others diminished. And what they're really doing, often without realizing it, is offloading their own internal frustration. Their shadow is speaking, and it's using you and others as a mirror to reflect the parts of themselves they don't want to face. And that's a part of their feelings that they merely don't want to face. If they gossip to you, they gossip about you. That's not paranoia, that's pattern recognition. Another sign, and perhaps one of the most painful, is the resentment someone carries when you succeed. You share your joy and they change the subject. You celebrate a new step forward and their congratulations sound flat. The smile is delayed. The eyes are distant. There's a pause as if your good news had to be swallowed before it could be accepted. You may notice they become less available when things go well for you. They drift, they become busier. Or worse, they respond to your happiness with a story of their own hardship, as if to say, how dare you be joyful while I'm still struggling. What they often don't realize is that your success activates their shadow. It brings up feelings of inadequacy, of comparison, of fear that they are somehow falling behind. But instead of facing those emotions, they project them outward onto you, and you begin to feel guilty for winning. You begin to silence your light so they'll stay close. But let me tell you, there is no version of your life where shrinking yourself will protect someone else from their own healing. It doesn't work that way. The final sign is the most elusive of all. It doesn't live in words, it lives in the body. It's the subtle shift in posture when you speak, the glance that lingers a second too long when you succeed, the tight smile, the averted gaze, the way their energy pulls away from you even when their words sound warm. These are micro-expressions, the language of the subconscious, the place where the shadow seeps out because it has nowhere else to go. You might feel this most clearly in your gut, a sensation of unease, even when everything looks fine. That's your body recognizing what your mind hasn't fully named, because your nervous system is designed to detect safety, and when it doesn't feel safe, it will whisper. It will tighten. It will send signals, not to scare you, but to prepare you. You don't need to read minds to see the truth. The body never lies. Carl Jung believed that what we refuse to face within ourselves doesn't disappear, it gets projected. We cast it onto others, like a shadow cast by a flame. If someone has buried their anger, they will find reasons to be irritated with you. If someone cannot accept their own envy, they will find flaws in your joy. If they have rejected their vulnerability, they will attack yours. Projection isn't always aggressive. Sometimes it's passive. Sometimes it's so subtle it slips right under your radar. But once you understand it, you begin to see the world and the people in it differently. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's true not just for you, but for everyone around you. The more unconscious a person is, the more likely they are to treat you not as you are, but as a symbol of everything they can't admit about themselves. You might become their scapegoat, their target, or their quiet competition, and it won't make sense because you've done nothing wrong. But that's the danger of being a mirror for someone else's shadow. You reflect back what they've disowned, and in doing so, you trigger their pain, not by attacking them, but simply by existing as you are. But here's where your power lives. When you understand that much of what's being aimed at you isn't about you, you stop internalizing it. You stop making it your job to fix, to appease, to apologize for, shining too brightly or moving too freely. You begin to detach, not from compassion, but from confusion. You realize you're not responsible for their unspoken wars. You realize you don't have to absorb the emotions they refuse to process, and you begin to choose your peace even when others haven't chosen theirs. So what do you do with all of this when you've noticed the signs, when your intuition is quietly tugging at your sleeve, when the smiles no longer feel safe and the conversations leave you drained? How do you protect yourself without becoming guarded, without turning cold, without carrying their shadow as your burden? You begin by telling yourself the truth. The truth is that you've sensed this for a while. Maybe you brushed it off, told yourself you were being too sensitive. Maybe you excused the behavior, thinking it was just stress or that they meant well. Maybe you tried harder, gave more, tried to win them over to prove that you were worthy of warmth. But the truth is, your nervous system doesn't lie. Your emotional clarity doesn't lie. When someone doesn't wish you well, you can feel it, even if their words are sweet. You can feel it in your chest, in your shoulders, in the silence that fills the space after they speak. And that truth matters. It matters because ignoring it slowly chips away at your self-worth. It matters because it teaches your heart that discomfort should be tolerated just to keep the peace. What peace is that, really? You don't need to call them out. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to expose or confront. You don't even need to explain yourself. The greatest act of emotional self-defense is not retaliation, it's redirection. It's choosing where your energy flows and who gets access to your softness. You can start by adjusting your proximity. That might mean spending less time changing the tone of the relationship or choosing not to share your joys where they won't be honored. You can be kind without being close. You can be polite without being available. You don't owe anyone your openness, especially when it's been met with hidden harm. Start listening to how you feel after you've been around someone, not what they said, not what they claimed, but how your body felt in their presence. Uplifted, safe, seen? Or did you leave confused, second-guessing, feeling just a little smaller than when you arrived? That feeling is feedback, and it's just as valid as logic. Your energy doesn't lie, neither does theirs. Carl Jung believed that the goal of life was not to be good in the traditional sense. It was to be whole, to integrate both the light and the dark within us, to face the parts of ourselves we've denied, and in doing so become more honest, more grounded, more real. But not everyone is on that journey. Some are still projecting, still blaming, still wearing masks to cover what they refuse to heal. And when you interact with those people, you're not engaging with their whole self. You're engaging with the mask, with the disguise, with their shadow acting out just beneath the surface. You don't have to hate them for it, but you also don't have to absorb it. Boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. They let in what nourishes you and keep out what harms you. And when you start recognizing these subtle signs of hostility, when you see the sarcasm for what it is, when you catch the fake kindness, when you stop excusing the tension you feel in your chest, you begin to reclaim something sacred. You'll have clarity. Because when you can see clearly, you stop trying to change people who aren't willing to look at themselves. You stop over-explaining to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop bleeding energy into relationships that quietly ask you to dim, to doubt, to disappear. You don't need to shrink just because someone else hasn't expanded yet. You don't need to pretend you're not doing well just because someone else can celebrate you. And you definitely don't need to carry the weight of someone else's projections on your back, like they're yours to hold. What you need, what we all need, is a life surrounded by people who meet us as we are, not as a mirror for their wounds, not as a character in their inner conflict, but as a whole, real human being who deserves honesty, peace, and presence. So let yourself trust the signs. Let yourself honor what your body has been telling you all along. Let yourself detach from those who smile with their mouths but not with their eyes. Let yourself walk away from sweetness that leaves you bitter. You are not being dramatic. You are being discerning. You are not paranoid. You are perceptive. And most importantly, you are not obligated to stay in emotional spaces that make you question your light. When someone secretly resents you, it's not because you've done something wrong. It's often because you remind them of a part of themselves they haven't made peace with. And that's not your responsibility to fix. Your only job is to protect your energy, to choose peace over performance, to recognize that not all hostility looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like kindness with teeth. Sometimes it sounds like laughter with a jab. Sometimes it's the absence of support when you needed it most. You're allowed to walk away from that with grace, with your head held high, with your energy intact. And when you do, something beautiful happens. You make space for the people who see you clearly, who celebrate you without competing, who hold your joy with both hands because they've done the work to hold their own pain. You deserve to be around people who don't need you to shrink in order to feel tall, people whose kindness doesn't come with strings, people who have made peace with their own shadow and won't make you pay the price for it. Because here's the quiet truth. When you stop trying to win the love of those who secretly resent you, you finally free yourself to experience the kind of love that was never based on winning to begin with. And that kind of love, it never has to hide.